started in just a minute, but in the meantime, as the Bill's photos are scrolling through, if you have any questions about them, just make a mental note, and they may be answered in the course of the discussion tonight, but if not, we'll have a little question and answer session at the end. So I'm going to go ahead with some announcements. I'm Kim Ball. I'm the Vice Chair and Events Chair of the Handley 100th, and many of you have seen me before in this role. I'm going to start out by just saying a few things that are coming up, and then we'll get on with the program, which is going to be very interesting, I'm sure. We have a lot happening. This weekend, there's an alumni soccer event at the school, if anyone is interested in that. On Monday, I think many of you may be interested, we're having, it's the Winchester Public Schools March to Judge Handley's grave, and as a result of the Handley 100, the alumni are invited to participate. So we're going to have, I've got these really nifty signs that will have the different decades, and so we'll be part of the processional to the grave. Bring your own flowers. We'll be invited to bring the flowers up and lay them on the grave. There'll be some short speeches, the band will play, the chorus will sing, and it will bring back a lot of fond memories from our days at the end of school years. So that's Monday at 9:30. Please be in the cemetery by 9:30. And if you would like to enter on the Pleasant Valley Drive gate, you can park down there, and we are going to have shuttles that will bring you up closer to the gravesite, okay? Because otherwise, I mean, you can park in the Court Square Auto Park. That's quite a slog up that hill, as we know, but so several options for parking, but try to be there by 9:30. The students will be entering the cemetery in their processional probably around 9:50, and or no, 9:45, and as you may know, it's not what it used to be. It's not all of the school students from all grades. It's representatives of each school, as well as the band and the chorus. All right, so that's Monday. Next Thursday, in this auditorium, we have a panel discussion from our program and Alumni Speakers Series. This is a panel of Handley graduates who have gone on to become Handley teachers. So we're going to hear from them as to what inspired them to become teachers and what inspired them to come back to Handley, how things are the same, how things are different. So that's next Thursday, 6:30 here. On Saturday, there's a music series event, which is Caressing Steel. It's a tribute to Rush. So I know we have a lot of Rush fans in the audience. I'm laughing because I had to ask somebody who was Rush. Oh. Anyway, I'm sure they're very good, and I'm going to go. It's at the Backseat Events Center next Saturday night, and we have 3 Handley alumni in that band. All right, and then, of course, as you may know, we're going to have a float in the Apple Blossom Parade, a float that's being built right now by the students at the Innovation Center, designed by the art students. The float will be directly behind the Handley Band in the parade, near the beginning. And one more thing on Apple Blossom. If you missed the program last week here, which was about Handley's role in the Apple Blossom Festival over the course of 100 years for each organization, that is online now. So you can go to our website and watch the pageant video that was shown last week. It's a 35-minute video from the 1950s, I believe. So you can see that online if you missed it. And then also make note that May 18th is Handley 100th Day in Old Town. So we will be having a number of events, exhibits, merchant participation, all centered around Old Town Winchester on that day, the 18th. All right, March, who's here tonight to videotape. He's been involved in several committees on the Handley 100th, and also recognize the Handley Regional Library, which has been so generous to us with programs throughout this year, and helping us with the technology and things like that. So I'll invite Harry and Bill to come on up and get situated. Is that okay? Harry is going to be, as you know, Harry is going to be the interviewer tonight. And Harry is the chairman of the Handley 100 Steering Committee, but for our purposes tonight, it's more important that he is a former classmate and friend of Bill Eaton. And we're really glad that Harry has agreed to do this, but we're especially glad that you're here. And
don't say that yet.
No, I'm sure. And we have a little Handley 100 swag bag for you.
Oh,
so I'll take this with me, so it's not in the pictures, but I'll make sure you get it at the end. And
thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Sure.
And I'll let
Thank you.
Harry provide some more formal introduction. Bill.
Thank you, Kim, and appreciate all the work you've done for the last 3 years. Just another couple months to go and we're finished.
Yeah.
So let us get set up here. You put that wherever you like.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here. I've got the distinct pleasure of introducing a lifelong friend from our days at Quarles and Handley and beyond, Ambassador William Eaton. I know there are some classmates and family members here. His sister Chris is with us in the front row. Chris, give a wave. And I know he knows he's back in Winchester when people call him Billy. Yeah. I hope you did have a chance to see the slides. We'll talk about those, but if there's something that we miss, and as Kim said, if you have a question, please let us know. We'll have a hard stop on this at about 7:35. No later than 7:45. The ladies at the library are absolutely fantastic, but they close up at 8, and you don't want to be up there a minute till 8. I can promise you that. So we'll make sure that we keep good time here for that. So Bill, what I'll do too for you and for the group, if we talked about Bill's career as I think we should and as he deserves, we would be here probably for breakfast. He has had such a career of public service, and really starting off in, I think, some humble means, ways, and manners, and still is quite a humble man. So we do want to thank Christopher again in the back for what he's been doing, and we have several classmates. Class of 71, raise your hand. Steve, Vic, didn't raise your hand, Bill, nope. Or Billy. So talk with us a little bit, share with us thoughts or memories you have from your early days in Winchester, Quarles, Handley High School.
Well, I was saying to Harry that I don't think we appreciate how fortunate we were to live in Winchester and to go to school here. We had some of the, I think, world-class teachers. Mr. Ohms, who told me how to add. No, really, we really did have some amazing programs at Handley. And I remember when I went to college thinking that I was so intimidated by all these kids that had gone to these big schools in big cities, well-known schools, and I thought, oh my God. But we as Handleyans people from Handley can compete with them. And I think that's one of the things that our teachers stressed with us, that we can be anything we want to be. Don't set your sights too low. And I really appreciate that. And Winchester itself has so many community events that are part of the life here. And you were talking about the march to the cemetery to get our final grades.
Yes, right.
But I mean, there are so many traditions in Winchester that are part of the community spirit, and we take that for granted. We think that every city's like that, but they're not. And that's some of the things that I take back from my time here. Is also the commitment to public service. I think that was something that was stressed through school and beyond from Winchester, and I certainly appreciate that. I think it was a good foundation for all the people that live in Winchester, but I feel especially fortunate.
Yeah. Well, speaking of a good foundation, and we do have a Handley up there if anybody would like to take a look at that, but just a couple highlights I'll brag about Bill. In his, not just his senior year, but at Handley, voted most likely to succeed. I think we saw something in you in those days. Co-chair of the prom, assistant business manager of the Handleyan, to a great business manager.
They're terrific.
That me. We were a heck of a team, weren't we? Member of the National Honor Society, Thespian Club, the Chorus Glee Club, Chapel Choir, Science Fair winner locally, and I think he went to the Region Science Fair. And I asked Bill earlier today, did he remember his senior quote? And he goes, I don't think so. If you refuse to accept anything but the best, you very often get it. But in addition to that, Bill, graduation, you had a little stint with the AFS as a foreign exchange student. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was also another opportunity that Winchester provided. The American Field Service is an international student exchange program. And I got to go to Belgium and live with the Belgian family for a year. Went to school. They all spoke Dutch. I spoke not a word of Dutch, but I had to learn it very fast. All my exams were in Dutch. And we had trimesters. My first trimester, I got a negative score.
Oh.
But I was number one in my Dutch class at the end. But you had to learn. And I spent the first 3 months talking in sign language and stuff like that because I just couldn't talk. And I remember one time I was sitting in algebra class in Belgium, and I'd been sitting there. I didn't understand anything that was going on. Every night I would take all the notes from one of my classmates who had a very clear handwriting. So I took those home, and I'd look up every word, memorize the words, and come back the next day. I'd have that many more words that I knew in Dutch. But I was sitting in algebra class after I'd been there for like 2 months, something like that, and the teacher asked a question, and I sat up, and my eyes got wide, and she goes, "Bill, what's the answer?" And I go, "Hell, I don't know the answer. I just understood the question." But it was a great experience, and that's what got me interested in being a diplomat, because I felt like I was representing the United States every day with the people in this small community, and had a wonderful family that I'm still very close to. I talk to them frequently. They come here. Both my Belgian mother and father died, and I went to their funerals. We're just a very close family, and it was a close bond between cultures, because my upbringing in the United States was very different from theirs, and trying to understand how they think, not just how they talk, but how they think, and that really was good training for the Foreign Service when I went to the States Department.
So other than Mr. Umps, any teachers, mentors at Handley or in the city during those early years?
Well, let me just say something about Mr. Umps. I've invited Mr. Umps to my swearing-in ceremonies, and one of the reasons was he probably doesn't realize that he had a tremendous influence on me because he had high expectations. He didn't take crap. You had to do your work, and you had to be on your game all the time, not just in sports, but also in the classroom. And that was very good training. And another was Miss Barr, who was just a wonderful woman. I learned so much from her, but it was also a very disciplined study, and it was she didn't take guff from anyone. Right. But she was just a wonderful person. And I remember when I was in 10th grade, one of my teachers, and I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember who it was, There's a woman teacher, and it was in one of the social studies courses. Gave us as a topic, we had to do a research project on a career in public service. And so I went to the Handley Library and was looking through these books to try to figure out what career in public service do I want to write about. And I found foreign service, the American Diplomatic Corps. And I did my paper on the State Department and working as a diplomat. And those were the sorts of things I think that the school offered lots of opportunities to try new things. Like I went to the science fair. I was terrible in science. I hated science. But Ms. Carson just insisted that I had to work hard in chemistry and learn chemistry, and I was like, oh God. but the high expectations of the faculty was one of the things that I really treasure.
Good. So you graduate Handley, spend a year in Belgium, and one of the photos we had up was of you and your Belgian brother, I think the one at the White House, so if you all saw that. So Belgium and then college?
No. While I was in Belgium, it was January 3rd of 72. I'd just been in Belgium since July. And I got a call from Betty Burkholder saying, Bill, I've got bad news for you. And I said, what? And she goes, you've been drafted. Your draft number is 3. And I was like, oh crap. And so she worked with Kenneth Robinson to get me an extension, because then there was no student deferments. But they got me an extension until I was going to be leaving Belgium before I had to be inducted into the Army. And this was in the Vietnam War, obviously. And I arrived in Winchester, coming back from Belgium, and that very day, there was a letter, greetings from the President, report for duty. And so I was drafted. I went basic training in Fort Knox, then went to Fort Gordon, Georgia for radio operation, which I never did. And then they sent me to Korea, and I spent 2 years in South Korea, and then left the military, and then I went to college.
Did that further your desire in the military for foreign service?
Oh yeah.
So then college. Talk about college.
Well, one of the things I mentioned to Harry that I when I think about choosing colleges, when I was in high school, I went to the guidance counselor, one of the guidance counselors, and I said I was thinking maybe applying to UVA, and the guidance counselor said, don't do that. You just embarrass yourself. Nobody from Winchester ever gets into UVA. And so I thought, okay, I guess I won't apply to UVA. So I didn't. I applied to other schools, and then I got drafted. So then I delayed my entry into college. But when I was in the military, I was thinking about the future, and I was thinking, well, I want to go to college. And hell, I'll apply to UVA. If they say no, well, big deal.
Yeah.
And got in. And I was telling
Did you write that counselor?
I did not.
Oh, okay.
But there is a phenomenon in small cities, I think, of low expectations. And the trick is just not to let that get you down.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that lesson the hard way, I guess. But I went to UVA and studied, guess what, international relations. And then it took I knew I wanted to get in foreign service, and they give a test every year to start the process of joining the foreign service. And they were giving the test. It's free. It was on a Saturday. And so I told one of my government teachers, I said, well, I'm going to take the foreign service exam. And he goes, oh, Bill, don't do that. And I said, why? And he goes, oh, no, you can't pass it. You have to be a PhD in order to pass that damn test. And I said, well, it's free. They don't keep any records if you fail it. So what the hell? I'm going to take the test and then see what I need to study in graduate school in order to pass the exam. And then I passed the exam. But it took like a year for the process to go through. You have the written test is the first. It's a screening, like 23,000 people take it, and 2,000 pass it, and then they choose like 200. So it takes a long time to winnow it down, and then the security clearance took about a year, and I went back 8 months, something like that. So I went to work in Woodstock with the Shenandoah Valley Herald, which is one of the bird newspapers. Did that for a year, and I loved it. And it was a good experience for the State Department, because in the State Department you spend a lot of your time writing telegrams to Washington, telling policymakers in Washington what's important, what's going on in the country, how does that affect U.S. relations, what do we need to be doing in order to emphasize those policies that we want in the United States. And so
that was a year.
When I came in, yeah. But one other thing, when I'm talking about government service, when I was in college, when I was in college, another person that had a big influence in my life was Wendell Selden. He was city manager, and my last 2 years of college, I spent working with him and watching his management style and how he balanced politics and the reality of the city, having big visions about what the city could be and how it could look, things that we needed to fix. And that was, I actually, when I went to the State Department, my job was on the management track of the State Department, using the skills that I learned from Wendell Selden. I thought about him a lot as I was going through my career when I was in management jobs.
So one of the pictures that you saw was Bill in the 70s, nice haircut, big glasses, and a mustache. You've lost some hair, as have I. You've lost the mustache, and you've lost the glasses. And part of that period was working with Mr. Selden.
Right.
But what other summer job did you have?
Well, my first 2 years at university, I went to Rock Eaton. I was the camp first aider for 2 years. And I know nothing about first aid. So it was pretty terrifying for me. So you can imagine what the scouts, they must have been terrified to have me trying to nurse them back to health. My first day at Camp Rock Eaton, they carried this young kid, must have been like 12 years old, had an axe embedded in his lower leg. Ow. And I go, oh shit. So I did that for 2 years. Then by then I knew I wanted to go into government. I wanted to do government service, and so I applied for the job to be an intern with Wendell Selden. But I needed money to pay for college, so I got a nighttime job as the beer tender at the back room.
And if y'all remember seeing Bill?
And that taught me diplomacy too, because every once in a while a fight would break out. I'd have to jump over the bar and break up a fight in the back room, but it was fun.
I'll bet it was. So we're all the way up now to August of 1979, and you're beginning your field service. Bill and I agreed that I'm going to go through his service because it almost appears he can't hold a job. And he can talk about that in a moment. But in 1979 to 1981 in Georgetown, Guyana, I believe right after Jonestown.
Right.
How was that situation?
Well, it was quite a time to go to Guyana. The People's Temple had their mass suicides, and I got to go to Jonestown with the ambassador. Nobody else from the embassy wanted to go with him, but I thought this would be interesting, so I went with him to Jonestown to see what it was like, and there were still the Flavor Aid boxes, cardboard boxes that were being moved around by the wind. I also I did a year as consular officer. In the State Department, the first job you do, you have to be a consular officer. You issue visas and you take care of American citizen services and things like that. So one of the things I had to do was visit in jail Larry Layton, who was the guy that killed the NBC reporter and the U.S. congressman, among others. That was quite. It was a scary sort of experience, because as a consular officer who's an American citizen, I had to take care of him. And so I go in there, and they had all these guys with guns all around, and they said, do you want to stay in the room while you're talking to him? And I said, no, he's an American citizen. I want him to be able to talk plainly. After that first meeting with him, I said, okay, bring guys to the guns here. And the other guy was that I visited was Bikeman was his name, who probably had an IQ of about 60 or something like that. Really a nice guy who was in the People's Temple headquarters in the capital city of Georgetown. And when Jim Jones was issuing instruction for people to start drinking the Flavor Aid, they sent a radio message to Georgetown, the capital city, and it was he said White Knight. And when he heard White Knight, Bikeman, his responsibility was to round up all the children of People Temple people that lived in Georgetown, the capital city, take them to the bathroom, put them in the tub, and slit their throats. And so I had to talk to him once a month too. But then after I went with the ambassador to Jonestown, I had to write a telegram to Washington about Jonestown a year afterwards. And it got a lot of attention, so the ambassador gave me a reprieve from consular work.
Wow, yeah.
And I went into the political section, and I had the fun job because I was dealing with all the opposition groups. And this was, the government was very corrupt, very anti-American, and I had to talk to the opposition groups and things like that, which was sometimes risky. I had one demonstration, somebody was killed right in front of me. So that was, but I think also my experience working at a newspaper helped me with the writing, because I could write quickly, I could write in a way that I thought would catch the attention of the people back in Washington. So after that, they, I think they felt sorry for me for being in Guyana. It's one of the, we ranked the post by hardship differential. And Guyana had the highest hardship differential of any post in the State Department. So I think they felt sorry for him for being in Guyana. And so they asked me what I wanted to do, and I surprised them by saying, I want to go to Moscow. Because my area of specialization in college was Soviet studies. And so I thought, this would be great. I'd like to go to Moscow. I just was fascinated by everything having to do with the Soviet Union at that time. And this was in the height of the Cold War. This was when Brezhnev was in power. And we were the enemy, and the American diplomats were really the enemy. And I was there for Brezhnev, and then he died. And then Andropov came to power, and then he died. And then Chernenko came to power, then he died. And then I was reassigned. But it was like living in a James Bond thriller, because you had KGB agents that would go into your house several times a week and rifle through all your things. They followed you everywhere. They taped your phone calls. They were always trying to do things to set you up for a photograph that would they could use in the press to say the American diplomats are all spies and stuff like that. I spoke Russian, and pretty good Russian, and I supervised about 100 Soviet workers in the U.S. Embassy, and became good friends with them. Friendship was limited to the embassy because you couldn't see them in their homes, you couldn't invite them to your home because they had their KGB masters to give them instructions. But I worked up a friendship with them, a lot of vodka drinking. Sitting with him after work and talking to him, because we didn't have a chance to meet normal Russians, and this was a chance to find out more about how they think, what they think, things like that. And what happened was that I became friends with them, and they started telling me things that they weren't supposed to tell me. And so we found out about all sorts of, I found out about all sorts of KGB operations that were underway, and people in the embassy that they had targeted, and things they were going to do to try to get this person into trouble or to try to coerce them to spy for the Soviet Union. And so I was able then to, because of these friends in the embassy, the Soviet friends in the embassy, because of what they told us, we were able to wind up some of the operations that the Soviets had planned against us, and in some cases turn it back on them. to make almost like double agents, whatever. But that really pissed off the Soviets. They found out that I was doing this. And so my last 6 months in Moscow was really, it was really awful. So bad that the ambassador called me into his office one day and said, I think we need to get you out of the country because it's getting a little bit too crazy.
Whoa.
And I said, I'm not going to let them chase me out of the country. You know, I studied Russian. This is what I wanted to do. I'm not going to leave the country. So I stayed until the bitter end. But then the last day that I was in Moscow, I could leave in August of '84. And on the last day that I was in Moscow, I chose the first flight out, the first day of August to get out. Well, so did a lot of other people at the embassy. So there were like 20 or 30 people in the embassy that were being reassigned someplace else. We go to the airport early in the morning, and there's an announcement saying the flight is delayed. And everybody, well, everything is delayed. So okay, no big deal. And then, well, it's going to be delayed for 2 hours. And they kept on and on. They kept delaying this all the morning. And finally, at around noon, they made an announcement saying the flight had been canceled. And the wife of the army attaché in the embassy came running across the main hall of the airport and started beating me on the chest, saying, "You son of a bitch, why did you have to choose my flight?"
Oh.
Because it was pretty well known that they had it out for me, and so she thought it was my fault that her flight was canceled. I was glad to leave Moscow.
But you got out.
I got out.
So after that, for 2 years in Washington, special assistant to the assistant secretary for administration, and then a year learning Turkish.
Right.
Just as a side, how many languages do you speak?
6.
6. That doesn't count Latin, and you were
No, it doesn't
proficient.
count Latin.
You were proficient in Latin. You were, I wasn't, and I did have Mrs. Barr, and I think the same of her. She was a wonderful teacher. So then 87, 88 in Istanbul.
Right.
Anything exciting there? A year?
I love Turkey. I love the language. I love the people, and I spoke Turkish, and I had a lot of really good Turkish friends that kind of adopted me into their families, and so I got to participate in all sorts of Muslim rituals and so forth through them, through their families. It was a wonderful experience. But before I'd left, I'd been the special assistant to the Undersecretary of State for Management, who's responsible for managing all of our embassies everywhere in the world. And so I got to see the State Department from a very global perspective. And I get to Istanbul, and I'm, a small cog in a small wheel. And I didn't adapt well. I felt like, I want to do the big policy issues in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to, worry whether people's toilets flush. And so I decided I was going to leave the Foreign Service and talked to a friend in London who had just that day talked to somebody who was in Dallas with the Young Presidents Organization. And when the guy told him what sort of person he was looking for to hire for their vice president job in the organization, he said, well, Eaton would be the perfect person for the job. And so I interviewed and got the job and moved to Dallas, Texas, and lived there for 3 years with Young Presidents. And Young Presidents, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, it's kind of like a Rotary Club for young CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies, so it's kind of a rarefied organization. And it's divided into thirds. We always say divided in thirds. 1/3 were the entrepreneurs. And you had to be under 40. When you turned 41, you had to leave the organization. So it's for young CEOs. And it was a way to get them together, talking to one another, people who are in the same age, talking about similar problems they have with new companies or whatever. And so there was a third of the people in the Young Presidents were these brilliant entrepreneurs who had a great idea, started a company that became a multi-million-dollar business. Then another third were hired guns. The executives who had been hired, they went from company to company, but all of the companies were these multi-million-dollar companies. And the last third were what I call the lucky sperm. The people who had been born into a family that had a big company and stuff like that. And what was interesting about it was I went into, like any organization, the State Department has its way of doing business. And you have to learn the way of doing business, and that's the way you do it, and just learn it and memorize it and don't make waves. Well, I went to YPO and I saw how the private sector ran their organizations, and a lot of the same functions that we did in the government, but they had a different way of doing it. So when I came back, I stayed for 3 years, and I missed government service. I missed public service, and so I decided I was going to try to come back to the State Department. And normally they don't let you back after you leave the State Department as a diplomat. They don't let you back in because it's kind of like the priesthood. Once you've left, you aren't coming back. Because there's so many other people who want to join, so they don't bring you back normally. But for whatever reason, they brought me back, and I came back as kind of a rabble-rouser within the State Department, who had different perspectives on how we could do our jobs, things that we had done, a way we'd done business for 100 years just didn't make sense in the modern world. So I came back, and that was, I guess, how I got recognized in the State Department. I was always questioning, well, why do we do it like that? We could do it this way, use technology, do this and that a lot better, save money for the taxpayer, get the job done better and faster. So I kind of gained a reputation as being somebody who was going to question the norms in the State Department. And so then I came back to the State Department and went to Milan, Italy. Tough assignment. I was told when I was looking for my first assignment after coming back, they were going to send me to Nouakchott, N'Djamena, Chad, or Havana, Cuba. Because they wanted me to punish me for having dared to leave the State Department, so I had to earn my way back into the service. And so I was going to go to Cuba. I thought, well, that might be interesting. And then one guy who was going to go to Milan as the consul general said, no, you're coming to Milan with me. And which is, that was not punishment. So I went to Milan via Italian language training and had a great time. And while I was there, I was detailed to Rome because President Clinton at the time was going to make 2 presidential visits to Italy back to back. One was for the G7 and one was for the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Rome. And since I'd had experience working on presidential trips, nobody in Rome had any experience. So they said, Eaton, come down here, you're going to be the person responsible for working with the White House on this. And so I went down, and while I was there, the guy who was the executive director of the European Bureau, all the embassies throughout Europe and Eurasia, was passing through, and he was really upset. He says, this a-hole in Ankara, Turkey, has left me in the lurch. He's curtailed from his tour. I need to find somebody to go there that speaks Turkish who can run our embassy in Ankara. And my big boss in Rome said, well, Eaton speaks fluent Turkish, send him. But I was not the right grade, but they said, I guess they were desperate, so they sent me to Turkey. And I went to Turkey then for 4 years, which is unusual. I usually stay 3 years. But I just love Turkey. That's probably my favorite assignment that I had in foreign service. So I did that for 4 years and came back to Washington to take over the job as executive director for the European Bureau. And this was after the fall of the Soviet Union. So we had all of the former Soviet republics that we were also supporting. And that's where I had a platform, because the European Bureau is the largest, well, especially with Eurasia, with all the former Soviet republics, it's the largest bureau, geographic bureau in the State Department. And so just by being in that job, you had an audience. People listened to what you had to say because you spoke for thousands of workers. And so I there was always rattling the cage and trying to do things differently, and came to the attention of then it was who was the Secretary of State then? I can't remember who the Secretary of State was.
Before Colin Powell.
This was, yeah. I can't remember who it was. But they then said, well, we need somebody to be Assistant Secretary of State for Administration, and we want somebody who's going to shake things up. So they nominated me to be the Assistant Secretary of State for Administration, but it was in the last year of the Clinton administration. And if you remember, he was going through all the impeachment dramas and things like that. Nothing was going to go through the Senate. So my nomination lapsed. And then when George Bush was nominated, Colin Powell was going to be the Secretary of State, and they needed somebody to hold his hand basically and teach him how the State Department works, and also to tell him who were the turkeys in the State Department. You'd watch out for this person, and just how to get things done. And I'd had the military experience, so I could talk to him from an understanding of how the military thinks. And so I was designated his point person in the State Department to help him get ready for his confirmation hearings and so forth. And after working with him during the transition, I guess he realized that I wasn't, the devil incarnate, because I'd been nominated by Clinton. And so he convinced then President Bush to nominate me to be Assistant Secretary for Administration. And that was a fun job. Did it for 4 years. And it was fun because I was responsible for managing all of our embassies around the world and doing the nuts and bolts and how do you make things easier for people to get their jobs done rather than making it harder. Because the bureaucracy sometimes, oh my God, it's enough to make you slit your wrists. And so we did a lot of new things. And when Colin Powell, if you remember his speech at the United Nations, where he was talking, he held up the vial and said that this is part of the proof that Iraq is making weapons of war, chemical weapons and so forth. There's a whole story to that too, but I got to meet with Powell every morning at 8 o'clock, and so I got to know him pretty well, and what an amazing person he is. I just learned so much from him. Hard boss. He was a general, so he said, if you don't do your job on him, he can do push-ups. I was supposed to be in the job for, I was going to say, there's an epilogue to that. When the last year with Powell, the end of the first term of the Bush administration, Powell had a difficult relationship with Vice President Cheney. That's no secret. And so it was pretty clear that he wasn't going to be renominated for the job. And so that's when I was supposed to be there for 3 years, but he asked me to stay for a 4th year. He said, I know you probably can go out and get an ambassadorship after this, but I really like working with you. I want you to stay here. And he said, of all the things I've done as Secretary of State, the things that are going to be remembered are the things that you've been doing, all the management things in the State Department. We went from being one of the worst managed departments in the U.S. government to, I think it was number 3, something like that. And he said, that's the thing that people are going to remember me for. They're not going to remember me for the policy. And so he said, if you stay with me for that last year, he said, I'll make sure to take care of you. And so when it was clear he was leaving, he called me to his office and said, so have you thought about what you want to do? And ambassadorships are for 3 years. And so you have to look to see which ambassadorships are going to become available when you're available. And so I said, I want to go to Panama. And he goes, Panama? Why in the hell would you want to go to Panama? Why don't you go to Barbados and lie on the beach for 3 years and relax for a while? And I said, the reason I want to go to Panama is that when he was Secretary of State, he traveled to Panama twice. And I remember meeting with him when he came back from Panama. And both times he was so excited about what he saw in Panama. He said, this is the country on the brink of something really important. And if they make the right decisions over the next couple of years, they're going to become a first world country. If they make the wrong decision, they're going to be another Nicaragua. And I said, I want to be a part of that. And so he said, okay, well, I'll put in your name with the president. Well, like I say, this was at the end of the first term where Powell was not the most popular people in the White House. And so my nomination went over, and I got a call from White House personnel, and this guy was just really obnoxious. And he goes, Colin Powell is making a big deal about making you ambassador to Panama, but he doesn't make that decision. The President of the United States makes the decision. I thought, whoa! There was never any doubt in my mind who makes the decision. I said, I realize that I appreciate Powell's support, but I know that the President is the one that is going to be the one that ultimately makes the decision. And apparently that was enough to make the temperature lower, and the guy then started having a nice conversation with me. But I thought, my God, that call, he was really on fire.
No. And 3 years in Panama.
3 years in Panama, yeah. Which was, I loved Panama, and it was an interesting job. I don't think I'd want to be an ambassador again, though, because you're so in the public focus. I couldn't go out of my house without people surrounding me. You'd go to the supermarket, and people would follow you in the supermarket to see what you're buying and making comments about what you're buying. He doesn't need any more chocolate. And you'd go to restaurants and people would come to you and they want to get your autograph. They want to talk to you about their latest theory about what should happen in Panama. And so it was really talking about being in the public eye. I'd never had that sort of intense media scrutiny that I had there. And when I got to Panama, I thought that being an ambassador was, you're talking about big policy issues, but you're also running, a company basically. And so your job is to get people to work together, have a united front of what we're going to do as the U.S. government, what are our objectives in Panama, and then push to get those things done. But I'd been there for like a month, and the head of the USAID program came to my office and said, I'm really sorry. I should have come to you earlier about this, but we've got this big convention that we're putting on for all the people throughout Panama who are working on USAID programs. And they've all come to Panama. They've got booths in Panama City to tell them what they're doing, and it's an opportunity for them to share their ideas with other people. And we'd like you to open. It'll be you and the Minister of Culture and Trade. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. I said, but I can only stay for a while. I had 5 other functions that day. And I said, I can only stay, open it, and then I got to leave. I can't stick around for a long time. And so I got there, and I gave a speech to open it. And the media was there, all these television cameras and newspaper reporters and stuff like that. And they were like following me around everywhere I go. And the Minister of Trade was giving the talk afterwards, and everybody moved over to my side of the stage. And I thought, no. You get to listen to your Minister of Trade. And so then we go to the door to open you cut the ribbon to open this big conference. And I looked inside the conference, and there are all these people from all over Panama, they're in rural areas of Panama, who just had this starstruck look in their eyes, like, oh, it was like, Matt Damon, oh my God. And I thought, oh my God, I can't just leave after this, because this is a really important thing for these people that have worked hard for programs with the U.S. government, and I've got to spend some time with them. So I did the political thing where I went around, I spent 2 hours there, walking around to all the booths in this conference, talking to people, kissing babies, taking pictures, and talking to them about what their programs were and things like that. And that's when I suddenly realized my job is political. My job is to be the chief advocate for the United States in Panama. So I decided that what I needed to do, I needed to get all over Panama, because most of the ambassadors stay in the capital city, and that's about it. But we had one of the largest Peace Corps programs in the world in Panama. And these young kids, Muslim, there were a couple of retirees though, that were in these rural villages, like they'd have to take donkeys and ford streams and stuff like that to get to a city where they could get things. But they were living in tents and in huts and things like that. Oh God, my heart went out to these kids. And so I used that as an excuse to get around every part of Panama. So I would go to every place where we had Peace Corps volunteers. I would use that as an excuse to go there and tout what they're doing and talk to them about what they're doing. But it gave me a chance to see people outside of the capital city. And it attracted a lot of attention in Panama because that was unusual that somebody got all around the country. But one of the pictures was, you saw the picture in the slideshow with the guys with the machine guns. Well, that was one of the areas where no ambassador had been was the Darien Gap, which is the jungle area between Colombia and Panama. And the Pan American Highway stops in Panama and picks up again in Colombia, but there's no road to get from Panama to Colombia. It's just this very dangerous jungle area. And now you hear news about people that are trying to immigrate to the United States are going through the Darien Gap. I don't know how they can survive it. It was really pretty amazing. And so the Panamanian government was so alarmed that I wanted to go to the Darien Gap that they sent a whole army company with me with machine guns to protect me because there was all sorts of the FARC, the Colombian terrorist group, was very active there. The drug lords were very active there, so it was a pretty dangerous place. And they, the first night I got there, I was in this hotel room, and they gave me the deluxe suite, was on the top floor. And I was on the top of a bunk bed, and I heard this pitter patter. What is that? And all of a sudden, the ceiling caved in, and these rats fell into my lap while I was sleeping there. I thought, oh God. But that was some of the fun as an ambassador to be able to do things like that. And
I'll add a little something, Bill, that I had the opportunity to visit Bill. I think it was 2007
right.
with a group from Shenandoah University. And I'm thinking I'm going to go see Billy. And we land in Panama, and I'd spoken with him to line up meeting with him. We had a Panamanian guide, Doris, you would say Doris, and we were in our little mini bus, go up a hill to the embassy, the old embassy, and all of a sudden I started realizing this isn't Billy, this is Ambassador Eaton. The gates open, guards come out. I think there were dogs, but I know they had the mirror thing under to look for any bombs. And we go in, and these young CIA, FBI looking men, strong, white shirts, black ties, black suits, come down, greet us, very, very nice. The ambassador will be down in a moment. He's on a call. Bill comes down, meets with us. Probably should have been a half hour, probably was an hour and a half. And we're leaving. I had to leave early that week. He stayed and entertained the students the next week at his residence. So we're getting back on the little minibus, and Doris actually spent a little too much time chatting. President Fitzsimmons of Shenandoah was with us, and she was going like this to me with Doris. And so I kind of, got you back more with the students. So we get on the bus, Doris sits beside me, and she's crying. And I say, what's wrong? She said, you don't know how much this means to me. This doesn't happen in our lives. Your ambassador is more important to us than our president. And I think that again underscores what you learned.
Yeah.
Just a very important position. So we're going to jump ahead here, Bill. We've got about 5 to 10 minutes and a few questions. So you go back to the State Department as Dean of the School of Foreign Languages. I remember talking with you one time, and I said, well, I thought you guys just used Rosetta Stone, but I guess you actually had a school. So then you retired from State Department in 2010. What came next and why?
Well, I was.
Oh, that's right. You had a 7 to 10.
I
Yes.
was dean of the. I was diplomat in residence at the University of Texas in Austin.
That's right.
That was the one where you saw the Longhorn in the background.
Yeah.
I did that for a year. Taught diplomacy at the LBJ school at graduate level school, and I was also recruiting for the State Department. And the State Department didn't want me to teach a course. And I really wanted to teach a course because that way I'd meet students, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk to them. And as it turned out, I was right, because out of the class of 22 people, 16 of them got into the State Department. So it was an effective tool for getting top people from University of Texas to come to
Wow.
the State Department. Yeah.
So then what happened in 2010?
2010, I retired in 2010, and a friend of mine came to me and said he had seen an ad in the Economist magazine for the Assistant Secretary General of NATO in Brussels. And he said the job was posted saying that they want somebody who's going to transform NATO, because this was at the time the Cold War was over. What's NATO's mission going to be? That was the discussion then. But and so they were looking for somebody who could look at their operations and figure out how they could restructure NATO to meet the needs of NATO. And this was in 2010, something like that. And so it was a wide open competition. So we had candidates from, at that point it was 26 nations that were represented, and there were candidates from a lot of countries for this job. And the U.S. ambassador called me into his office right before I went in for it. It was a week-long series of interviews and tests and all this kind of stuff. Pretty grueling. And he said, you should be really honored that you're one of the finalists for this job. It's great you're in Belgium. You can spend some time to visit your Belgian family, but you're not going to get the job. He says, we, the U.S. government, have decided that this 3-star general from the Pentagon, they wanted him to be one of the there are 7 assistant secretaries general. They decided he was the one they wanted to be the U.S. representative, and they were putting all their political might behind him. And I thought, well, okay, fine. At least I got a free trip to Belgium. I can visit my Belgian family and friends in Belgium. Then I got the damn job. Much to everyone's surprise, I think. And I was the Assistant Secretary General for Executive Management, which meant that I was the running the nuts and bolts of NATO, mostly behind the scenes sorts of things. That was probably the hardest job I've ever had, because NATO is a consensus-based organization. So all 26 countries have to agree on everything. And when I say everything, I mean like ordering paper clips. You'd have to have a negotiation with countries about what countries are going to be able to supply paper clips. Oh my God. It was hard. And then with the European labor laws, my one of the people that was working in my front office, I'd been there for 6 months and she'd never shown up. And I said, what's the story with her? Why don't we let her go and we'll hire somebody to take her place? We got plenty of work to do. And they go, well, no, she's got a waiver from her doctor. She's stressed out that she's got a new boss. And so she's staying at home for 6 months, getting full pay. And in NATO, like a lot of European countries, you get so much leave, you almost can't use it all up. I mean, for us as Americans, I guess like equivalent to like 2 months of leave a year. Well, just think about running an organization where you're missing a large percentage of your staff at any given time because they're going to be on vacation, and it was really hard. But I did that for 3 years. They actually asked me to stay on. Normally it's supposed to be just for 3 years, and they never let the person stay on. They asked me to stay on another 3-year term. And I thought, oh no. And then my mother was sick at that time, and my sister, bless her heart, was doing all the care for my mother while I was overseas gallivanting around. And so I told them, I gotta go. So I left NATO and came back, and then retired for good.
Well, Bill, thank you.
Sure.
We appreciate you being here. We appreciate your service. I asked Bill walking down here if he, and I think Kim, you asked me this, are you going to write a book? And his comment was, hell no. Might be the KGB, might. They're going to figure out where you are. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you all.
We're going to wrap up, and this will be available online.